rejected by family, raised alone, a daughter's journey to forgiveness and redemption. A broken dream. Lily Adams, a 17-year-old high school senior, had always believed that her life was heading in the right direction. She had big dreams, a supportive group of friends, and the kind of future that seemed almost guaranteed to turn out beautifully. But none of that seemed as important as Ethan. Ethan Adams was everything she had imagined love to be. He was the charming soccer player with the winning smile and the kind words that melted her heart every time. They had spent countless hours together talking about the future. A future filled with shared dreams, love, and the promise of a life built side by side. Ethan seemed like her forever, her soulmate, and she thought nothing could ever come between them. They dreamed of moving into a little apartment together, maybe starting a small business and making a life in a big city, something both exciting and full of possibilities. But as high school graduation loomed, so did an unforeseen shift. Ethan, once deeply involved in their plans, started pulling away. At first, it was subtle, but it grew harder to ignore. Unanswered texts, distant conversations, and his increasing focus on his personal goals. He began talking less about their shared future and more about his individual plans for college and career. He set his sights on top-tier universities like Georgetown or Stanford, leaving Lily feeling like an afterthought. The connection they once had began to disintegrate. One chilly October afternoon, while they walked through a park lined with golden trees, Ethan stopped, turning to her with a serious expression. His eyes avoided hers as he delivered the words that shattered everything. "Freya, we need to talk," he said, his tone distant, as if he was preparing for something inevitable. Lily, her heart racing with the anxiety of not knowing where this conversation was headed, asked, "Is something wrong?" Ethan glanced at her before looking away again. "I just don't think this relationship fits anymore," he said, his voice cold and impersonal. "I've got big plans for the future, and it's holding me back." Lily felt as if the ground beneath her had vanished. She stood frozen, struggling to comprehend what she was hearing. How could he say that? How could their love, the very thing she had built her future around, just fall apart so suddenly? "You're saying I'm holding you back?" she asked, voice trembling, tears threatening to spill. Ethan looked at her for a brief moment, his gaze lacking warmth. "I'm sorry, Freya. I've made up my mind. It's better for both of us." He turned, walking away without another glance, leaving Lily standing alone in the autumn breeze. She felt as if the world had stopped turning, and for a long moment she was left in the silence of his absence. Her love for him, the future they had planned together, vanished before her eyes. A few weeks after Ethan's sudden departure, Lily's life took another unexpected turn. She started experiencing symptoms, nausea, dizziness, and a general feeling of being unwell. After some hesitation, she bought a pregnancy test from the local pharmacy and locked herself in the bathroom. Her hands shook as she waited for the result. When the 2 pink lines appeared, confirming her fears, Lily felt the weight of the world pressed down on her. She was pregnant, and Ethan was gone. The next day, Lily's dread transformed into a new kind of fear. She had no idea what to do. What would she tell her parents? Her life had already been turned upside down by Ethan's abandonment, and now this. She wasn't ready to be a mother, and the reality of her situation set in with crushing clarity. That evening, Lily tried to act normal as she sat down to dinner with her parents. Her mother, Helen, was busy setting the table, humming a tune. Her father, John, sat at the head of the table reading the newspaper, as he always did. The smells of meatloaf and mashed potatoes filled the air, a comforting sight in Lily's troubled heart. "Lily, dinner's ready," her mother called out cheerfully, unaware of the storm brewing in her daughter's mind. Lily hesitated. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of her chair. "Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you," she said softly, her voice shaking. Her father looked up, eyes narrowing. "What's going on, Lily? You look like you've seen a ghost." Her mother stopped mid-scoop, glancing at her daughter's pale face. "Is everything okay, honey?" Lily swallowed, her throat tight with fear. "I'm pregnant," she choked out, her words barely escaping as she broke down. "I don't know what to do." The silence that followed was deafening. Her mother's hand flew to her throat in shock, and her father's face reddened with anger. Her mother's voice trembled. "How could you? You've ruined everything. Do you realize what people will say? What the neighbors will think?" Lily felt her chest constrict. Her father slammed the newspaper down, his face hardening. "Who's the father? That Ethan kid, isn't it? The one who's been hanging around here." Lily tried to explain, but the words choked in her throat. "He's gone. He left me, Bob, but I'll figure this out. I swear I'll take care of it." Her voice cracked with desperation, but it wasn't enough. Her father's face contorted with rage. "You've ruined your life, Lily. You've ruined ours too, and now you expect us to help you? I won't have a child of mine raising a kid under my roof." And he stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her mother began to cry, but her father was firm. "Get out, Lily. You're not welcome here anymore. You're not my daughter anymore." Lily's heart shattered. Her parents, the people who had always been her foundation, turned their backs on her when she needed them the most. The words echoed in her mind. "Get out." She felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her, and she stumbled toward her room feeling like a stranger in her own home. Packing her few belongings into a duffel bag, Lily walked out of the house that had once been her home. The weight of her parents' rejection felt like a stone on her chest. She had nowhere else to go. She couldn't stay in the town that had witnessed her dreams fall apart. She had no choice but to go to Grandma Rose, her only hope. With tears in her eyes, Lily dialed Grandma Rose's number. Her grandmother's voice was the comfort she needed, even through the crackling phone line. "Grandma, I need to come stay with you. Can I come now?" The promise of shelter, of being loved and accepted by someone, was the lifeline Lily needed. Grandma Rose's house in Springfield, though small and tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, became Lily's refuge. As Lily stood on the doorstep of her grandmother's home that night, she realized this was just the beginning of her journey, a journey of survival, of self-discovery, and ultimately of forgiveness, struggles and strength. Lily Adams stood in the dimly lit room of her grandmother's house, the scent of cinnamon and old wood filling the air. It was a modest home, tucked in a quiet corner of Springfield. Her grandmother, Rose, had opened her arms to her when Lily's own parents had turned their backs. In that moment, Lily felt both relief and guilt. Relief that she had somewhere to go, somewhere safe. Guilt that she had disappointed the very people who should have loved and supported her no matter what. The first few weeks at Grandma Rose's house were quiet and full of reflection. Rose, a woman with silver hair and a heart full of wisdom, never pressed Lily to talk about what had happened. Instead, she gave her the space she needed. It was in these silent moments that Lily began to heal, slowly but surely. Tom, her baby boy, was her world now. Every smile from him, every gurgle, every little milestone he reached filled Lily with a sense of purpose she hadn't known before. She was no longer the frightened teenager who had been kicked out by her parents. She was a mother, and she had to fight for her son's future. The pain from the rejection still lingered, but her love for Tom made her stronger than she'd ever imagined. But reality hit hard. The bills piled up, and Lily knew that if she wanted to give Tom a good life, she had to make ends meet. Grandma Rose wasn't a wealthy woman, and she couldn't afford to support Lily indefinitely. So Lily took the first job she could find, a waitress at the local coffee shop, Rose's Cafe, named after her grandmother. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Every day, Lily woke up before dawn, her muscles sore from sleeping in an old couch that barely fit her and Tom. After feeding Tom and making sure he was settled in his crib, she would put on her apron and head out the door, the cold morning air biting at her skin. The cafe wasn't busy at first light, but it was steady, and the work was exhausting. The smell of fresh coffee beans filled the cafe, masking the grease of the diner grill. Lily was grateful for the job, but she wasn't prepared for how draining it would be. The long hours on her feet left her tired, her back aching by the end of each day. She worked from 7 a.m. until late in the evening, only having a few brief moments to check on Tom during her lunch break. She lived for those moments when she could rush back to Grandma Rose's house, scoop Tom into her arms, and breathe in the scent of his baby's shampoo. He was the only thing that kept her going. Despite the exhaustion, Lily was determined to keep going, and Grandma Rose was always there with a kind word and advice that kept her grounded. Rose, a woman who had raised children of her own and had lived through hardships Lily couldn't yet understand, was the epitome of strength. She'd seen the world change, lost people she loved, and still stood strong. Her presence was a quiet comfort to Lily. One evening, after Lily had put Tom to bed, Rose sat with her on the old plaid couch, the warmth of the fire crackling in the background. "You know, child," Rose began softly, "the world will test you, especially when you're down. It'll push you, make you feel like you're nothing. But you must remember this, it's not how many times you fall, it's how many times you get back up." Lily looked at her grandmother, tears welling in her eyes. "How do you keep going, Grandma, after everything, after what happened with my parents?" Rose smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "Life's not about making perfect choices, Lily. It's about making the best out of the cards you've been dealt. It's about finding strength when you feel weak and hope when you feel hopeless. You're not alone, sweetheart. You have me, and you have Tom. And that, my dear, is all you need to build a life." Lily wiped away a tear. For the first time in months, she felt like someone believed in her. She had so much to be thankful for, even if it didn't feel like it some days. She had a roof over her head, a job, and a son who loved her unconditionally. Every day, Lily felt her strength grow, but it wasn't without its struggles. Working at the cafe was exhausting, but the hardest part was feeling like she was stuck in a cycle of survival. She wanted to do more than just survive. She wanted to give Tom the life she dreamed of when she was younger. She wanted to be a mother who could provide for her son and not have to rely on anyone else. One particularly hard evening, after a grueling 12-hour shift, Lily walked home to find Grandma Rose waiting for her with a cup of chamomile tea. "You've been running yourself ragged, child," Rose said gently, her hands clasped in her lap. "I know you want the best for Tom, but remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. Take a moment for yourself." Lily sat down heavily beside Rose, gratefully accepting the tea. "I don't know if I'm strong enough, Grandma. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this." Rose's eyes softened and she placed a hand over Lily's. "You don't have to do it all alone, Lily, and you don't have to be perfect. You're already enough. Sometimes the best thing you can do is take a step back, breathe, and let the world come to you." That was the moment Lily realized something crucial. She didn't have to carry the weight of everything on her own. She had Grandma Rose, and she had Tom, and with their support, she could find a way to make a life for them, no matter how difficult it seemed. As the months went by, Lily continued to juggle work and motherhood, and though the struggles were real, there were small victories along the way. One evening, after a particularly successful night at the cafe, she was able to buy Tom a new pair of shoes. It wasn't much, but it felt like a huge accomplishment. There were other moments, like when Tom first said "Mama," or when Lily managed to save a little bit of money and buy herself a new coat for winter. These moments kept her going, kept her fighting, even when the weight of everything felt unbearable. Lily had learned something powerful in these first few months with Grandma Rose. Strength didn't come from perfection. It came from persistence, from getting up every time you fell, and from the love you give, even when you felt like you had nothing left. A mother's heartbreak. It had been a year since Lily Adams had left her family's home, forced out by the very people who were supposed to be her support system. A year of building a new life in the small town of Springfield, away from the hurt and rejection that had once consumed her. She had found solace in the quiet, the simplicity of life with her son, Tom, and the warmth of her grandmother's home. Yet, despite everything she had gained, there was a growing ache deep within her chest, a void that she couldn't ignore. Lily sat by the kitchen window one chilly autumn evening, her gaze fixed on the golden leaves falling from the trees outside. Tom was in the next room, playing with his toys, his laughter echoing through the house, but her heart wasn't in it. She could hear the faint crackling of the fireplace, the warmth it brought to the room, but it did little to ease the coldness she felt inside. It was the silence that haunted her most. The silence from her parents. The silence from the people who should have cared for her unconditionally. They hadn't called. They hadn't written. Not once in the entire year had they reached out to ask about her or her son. They had turned their backs on her, and that betrayal had left a scar deeper than anything she had experienced before. Freya often found herself replaying the moments from the day she was kicked out. The anger in her father's voice, the harshness of her mother's words, the finality in their rejection. She had expected them to be angry perhaps, but not like this. They had never shown any willingness to understand her fears, her dreams, or even the love she had for her unborn child. In their eyes, she had become an embarrassment, a disgrace, someone to be discarded. A part of Lily wished she could have done things differently. She regretted not standing up for herself more strongly, not fighting harder for a chance to explain her situation. But then again, she knew that in that moment she had been too scared, too young. She had believed that her family's love would always be there, no matter what, and yet it wasn't. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Lily tried to fill the emptiness by focusing on Tom. She was determined to be the best mother she could be for him, to give him everything she never had. But no matter how many milestones Tom reached, no matter how many times she saw his bright smile, there was still this constant ache in her heart, a longing for the family she once had, for the parents who should have been there to help her through it all. Lily couldn't help but wonder if they ever thought about her, if they ever thought about the little girl they had raised, the one who had dreamed of making them proud. Had they forgotten about the bond they shared when she was a child, when she still believed in fairy tales and happy endings? How could they so easily turn their backs on her now, when she needed them most? There were moments when the regret consumed her entirely. Like when she watched families at the park, parents and children sharing soft, tender moments. She saw the way mothers smiled at their children, how fathers protected their little ones with gentle hands. She saw Tom's yearning for a father figure, for someone to love him the way he deserved to be loved. And every time she saw that longing in his eyes, it reminded her of everything she had lost. It wasn't just her loss that hurt. It was Tom's too. He would never know what it was like to have a grandparent's love, the warmth of a family gathering, the bond between mother and father. In the absence of those things, Lily had done her best to fill the role of both parents, but there was a lingering sadness in her heart that she couldn't shake. Despite the strength she had shown in the past year, Lily felt the strain building. She couldn't talk to her friends about it, not in the way she needed to. They didn't understand the depth of her pain. They didn't know the family she had lost. And even if they did, what could they say to make it better? Her Grandma Rose, though a constant source of wisdom and love, was aging. She couldn't always be the emotional anchor that Lily needed, especially when she too had suffered from Lily's loss of family. Grandma Rose had always been there, of course. But even she couldn't fill the void left by her parents. One afternoon, as Lily sat alone in the small living room, Tom napping in the next room, she picked up the phone. It had been months since she had last heard from them. Her fingers hovered over the dial pad, the numbers of her mother and father's phone still fresh in her memory. Should I call them? She wondered. Would they even want to hear from me? Lily hesitated for a long time before placing the phone back on its cradle, her heart sinking. She knew the answer even before she made the decision. They had made their feelings clear. The following days were filled with moments of self-doubt. What was she doing wrong? Why couldn't she just let go of the past and focus on the future? Tom needed her, and that was enough, she told herself. But even with her son's endless love, even with Grandma Rose's constant support, there was a part of her that still longed for reconciliation with the people who had brought her into this world. Lily's heart ached for answers, for closure. She wanted to know why her parents had acted the way they did, why they had chosen to shut her out instead of offering their love and understanding. She needed to know if they ever regretted their actions, if they ever wished they had done things differently. The questions lingered in her mind, unanswered. They were a heavy burden, one she couldn't escape. She tried to bury the thoughts, to push them down deep inside her, but they always resurfaced at the most unexpected moments. When she saw happy families together, when she saw Tom's big eyes looking up at her with confusion, she couldn't help but wonder, why couldn't my family be like that? Lily knew she couldn't keep living like this, consumed by the hurt of her past. She had to find a way to heal, to let go of the pain that weighed her down. But letting go wasn't as simple as it sounded. It wasn't something she could just wish away. It was a process, one that would take time, one that she would have to fight for. For the first time since she left home, Lily felt the full force of her loneliness. She had been brave, had been strong for so long. But now the weight of it all was too much. The rejection, the betrayal, the distance from her parents, the love she had once so desperately wanted but could never have. It all came crashing down. But as she sat there in the silence of Grandma Rose's living room, she made a decision. It wasn't about forgiving her parents right now. That would come in time. It was about finding peace for herself, about letting go of the anger that had built up inside her. She owed it to herself, and to Tom, to be free of the past. And so, with a deep breath and a resolve to move forward, Lily made the choice to stop waiting for an apology. She had been strong for so long. It was time to be strong for herself, to build a future that was hers and Tom's. The past might never change, but the future, that was something she could still shape. Unexpected encounter. Lily Adams had never been one to put herself out there. After everything she had been through, the thought of trusting anyone, especially a man, felt like an insurmountable hurdle. For years, she had closed herself off, focusing solely on raising Tom and building a life with Grandma Rose. But life has a funny way of challenging our walls, and it wasn't long before Lily's world was shaken up in ways she hadn't expected. It all started at the local coffee shop, the place where Lily had spent countless mornings serving coffee and sandwiches, trying to make ends meet. It was just another dreary Tuesday morning, the soft hum of conversation and the whir of the espresso machine filling the air. Lily had just finished wiping down the counter when the door chimed, signaling a new customer. She didn't think much of it at first, but as the man stepped in, she couldn't help but notice him. He was tall, with broad shoulders, his neatly tailored suit a stark contrast to the usual crowd. His presence was magnetic, exuding confidence without being arrogant. "Good morning," Lily greeted as she flashed him a polite smile, trying not to let her curiosity show. He returned her smile with a warm one of his own, the kind that made her feel at ease despite the usual awkwardness she felt around strangers. "Morning," he replied, his voice deep and smooth. "I'll have a black coffee, please." As she prepared the coffee, the man glanced at her again, his eyes lingering just a moment longer than necessary. Lily's fingers trembled slightly as she worked, unsure why she felt a sudden rush of nervousness. It wasn't that he was overly handsome or charming in the traditional sense. There was just something about him, an energy that made her feel seen, like he was genuinely interested in the world around him. She handed him the cup, their fingers brushing for a brief second. "Here you go," she said, her voice a little quieter than usual. "Thanks," he said, nodding his head, but then he paused. "I've seen you here before. You always seem to be working so hard." Lily blinked, caught off guard. "Miss, I guess I do," she replied, unsure of how to respond to the unexpected compliment. There was a brief moment of silence before the man spoke again. "I'm Jack," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Jack Thompson." And Lily hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand, her skin still tingling from the contact. "Lily," she said, her voice sounding a little more distant than she intended. She quickly withdrew her hand and glanced around the cafe, feeling the sudden awkwardness of the encounter. Jack seemed to sense her discomfort. "I know you don't know me," he said, "but I've been coming to this cafe for years. Every time I come in, you're here, always smiling, always working hard. I just wanted to say it's impressive. You don't get a lot of people who give their all like you do." Lily was stunned. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. She wasn't used to receiving compliments, especially from someone she didn't know. Her instinct was to brush it off, to make a joke or deflect the attention, but Jack's sincerity made her stop. "Thank you," she said quietly, the weight of his words hitting her harder than she anticipated. Jack smiled, and for a moment it felt like the world around them disappeared. "I come in here almost every morning, and I've been meaning to ask if you'd like to get coffee sometime," he said, his tone casual but his eyes searching hers with quiet intent. Lily hesitated. She didn't want to get involved with anyone, especially not a stranger. She had her son, her work, and everything she needed in her life. She couldn't afford to get distracted by someone else's world. But as she looked into Jack's eyes, something shifted. There was kindness there, a gentle understanding that made her heart flutter with an unfamiliar sensation. "I don't know," she murmured, unsure. "I'm not really looking for anything like that." Jack nodded, not pressuring her. "I get it," he said with a reassuring smile. But if you ever want to talk or need someone to listen, I'm around. No pressure." And with that, he left, his presence lingering in the air long after he was gone. Over the next few weeks, Jack continued to visit the cafe every morning, and each time, he made a point to speak with Lily. Their conversation started off simple. Casual chats about the weather, the town, and the best coffee beans. Jack asked about Tom, and Lily found herself talking about her son with a warmth she hadn't expected to feel when talking about her life. She had always been guarded, especially when it came to her past, but Jack didn't push her. He was patient, allowing her to open up when she was ready. One afternoon, after an especially long shift, Jack surprised Lily by offering to drive her home. "You look exhausted," he said, his voice gentle, his eyes filled with concern. "Let me give you a ride, it's the least I can do." Lily hesitated but then nodded. "Okay, thanks," she said softly. As they drove through the quiet streets of Springfield, Jack asked about her life outside of work. Lily found herself sharing more than she intended. About Grandma Rose, the struggles of raising Tom on her own, and the challenges she faced every day trying to provide for them both. Jack listened intently, never interrupting, and his quiet encouragement made her feel like her story mattered. When they finally arrived at her home, Jack didn't rush off. He lingered for a moment, turning off the engine and glancing over at her with a warm smile. "You know, I've been thinking," he said, his tone thoughtful. "You deserve more than this. You deserve to be able to follow your dreams, to have everything you want. Don't sell yourself short." Lily was taken aback by his words. It had been so long since anyone had said anything like that to her. Her parents, when they had been a part of her life, had never encouraged her in that way. They had focused on their disappointment, their shame. But Jack was different. He saw her for who she was, not for the mistakes she had made or the life she had been forced into. As the weeks passed, their relationship slowly began to change. Jack continued to support Lily in small but meaningful ways. He helped her with things around the house, offering his expertise in fixing a leaky faucet or putting together a new bookshelf. He invited her to dinner at his apartment, and they spent quiet evenings together, talking about everything and nothing. Lily found herself falling into a routine with Jack, one that didn't feel like a burden, one that felt natural. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was worthy of something more, something beyond her past. With Jack's encouragement, Lily began to think about her own future. She enrolled in online courses, dreaming of a career in marketing. She started making small changes in her life, taking time for herself, not just Tom. And with each passing day, she realized how much she had been holding herself back. But most importantly, Lily began to understand something that had eluded her for so long. She deserved love, not just from others, but from herself. Jack hadn't just shown her kindness, he had shown her the power of believing in herself again. One evening, as they sat on the porch of her grandmother's house sipping iced tea and watching the sunset, Jack turned to her, his voice soft. "You're stronger than you think, Lily," he said, his hand resting gently on hers. "I see the way you care for Tom. The way you keep pushing forward, even when things aren't easy. You're amazing." Lily's heart swelled with emotion. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words. How much she had longed for someone to see her, to truly see her, not just as a mother or a survivor, but as a person worthy of love and happiness. "I'm not perfect," Lily said quietly, her eyes locking with his. "No one is," Jack replied with a smile. "But you're perfect just the way you are." For the first time in years, Lily allowed herself to believe it. The return of the past. It's strange how life has a way of pulling you back, even when you think you've moved on. Lily Adams, now in her late 30s, had built a life for herself. One where she was no longer a scared teenager, facing rejection from the people she once thought would love her unconditionally. But sometimes, the past doesn't stay buried. It lingers, hidden behind the corner of every quiet day and the edges of every fleeting thought. Lily stood alone in the small, cluttered living room of her grandmother's home. Grandma Rose had always been there for her, the one person who never gave up on her when her own parents had shut their doors. It felt surreal to think that after all these years, Grandma Rose was gone. The woman who had taught her the meaning of resilience, who had made her laugh during the darkest of times, had passed away quietly in her sleep a week ago. And now, here Lily was, standing in the same house that had witnessed so many of her firsts, the first time she cried about her broken heart, the first time she held Tom in her arms, and the first time she decided to take control of her own life. She hadn't known it then, but Grandma Rose's house was the one place that had anchored her through it all. As Lily adjusted the framed photo of her grandmother on the mantel, the doorbell rang, snapping her back to the present. It wasn't a simple visit. It was the kind of visit that made her heart race with a mixture of dread and uncertainty. When Lily opened the door, standing before her were her parents, Helen and John Adams. Her heart skipped a beat. They looked older than she remembered. Time had certainly left its mark. Her father, once a towering figure in her life, now seemed smaller, almost fragile. Her mother's eyes, filled with the same sharpness she remembered, were softened by time and regret. Yet, despite the years, there was a familiarity in their presence, an eerie echo of the parents she had once known. "Lily, we came to see you," her father said quietly, his voice cracking in a way that made Lily's chest tighten. There was no grand gesture, no apologies, just two people who had been absent for 2 decades standing on her doorstep, as if nothing had ever happened. For a moment, Lily stood there in stunned silence, unsure of what to say. The last time she had seen them, the last time they had seen her, she had been 17, pregnant, and thrown out of the house with nothing but her duffel bag and her dreams of a life that would never be. How could she forget the final words her father had spoken that night? "You've ruined everything. You're no longer our daughter. Leave." The memories flooded back like a wave, pulling her into the past she had worked so hard to escape. But then there was Tom, her son, her pride, her everything. And now, in this moment, she had to choose. Did she let herself remain imprisoned by the past, or did she allow herself the chance to heal? Lily opened the door wider, stepping aside so they should enter. "Come in," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the maelstrom of emotions swirling inside her. But we're not going to pretend like everything's fine. You don't get to just walk back into my life like you never hurt me." They stepped inside, their movements slow, almost hesitant. The silence between them was deafening, but Lily didn't have the words to fill it. How do you start a conversation with people who left you behind when you needed them most? How do you bridge the gap of 20 years and the betrayal she had lived through? They sat down on the couch and her mother, unable to look her in the eye, began the conversation. I know we've made mistakes, Helen said, her voice thick with emotion. But we've thought about it every day since, and we want to make things right. We want to be part of your life again, Lily. Tom, he's our grandson. Lily's breath caught at the mention of Tom. Her son, the child they had never met, the child who had been born into a world of abandonment and rejection. Her heart fluttered with a mix of hope and anger, but she managed to keep her emotions in check. You think you can just come back into my life after all these years? Lily's voice was cold, each word carrying the weight of her years of suffering. You left me when I needed you most. You kicked me out, told me I was a disgrace, and now you show up, expecting what? To be part of my life again, just like that. Her father, John, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his hands clasped tightly together. We were wrong, he said softly. We didn't know how to handle it. We didn't know how to face the shame. We failed you, Lily. The sincerity in his voice made Lily's resolve waver for just a moment. Her mother, looking down at her hands, added, We were scared. Scared of what people would say, of what we couldn't control. But we regret it every day, and we want to make amends, to be there for you and for Tom. Lily stared at them, searching their faces for any trace of the parents she once knew. But there was nothing. They were strangers now. Strangers who had once been family, but had abandoned her when she needed them the most. Her heart ached, but she couldn't ignore the truth. She had spent so many years trying to forget them, trying to heal from the wounds they had inflicted. But now they were standing in front of her, asking for forgiveness. For a moment she wondered if she could give it to them, if she could open her heart to them again. But before Lily could respond, a new wave of crisis hit. Tom had been sick for days, his fever spiking, his energy low, and it was clear that something was wrong. Lily rushed him to the hospital, her heart pounding with fear. She had no one but herself to rely on, but as she watched her son lying in that sterile hospital bed, she felt a deep sense of loneliness settle over her. In the hospital waiting room, something unexpected happened. Her parents, despite all the years of neglect and rejection, showed up. They were there, sitting in the cold plastic chairs, waiting alongside Lily, just like they used to when she was a child. They brought blankets, offered words of comfort, and, most unexpectedly, they were genuinely concerned about Tom's well-being. Lily's heart struggled to reconcile the emotions that flooded her. Could she really forgive them? Could she trust that they truly wanted to make amends, or was this just another attempt to get back into her life after everything they had done? As the days in the hospital passed, her parents continued to show up. They supported her in ways that she never thought possible. They offered to help with bills, stayed late to keep watch over Tom, and even began calling more regularly. And then one evening, as she sat beside Tom's hospital bed, exhausted but relieved to see him improving, Lily realized something. She was holding on to the past with a vice-like grip, but the future was slipping away. Tom was growing, and she didn't want him to grow up in a world where grudges festered and forgiveness was never given. She could choose to forgive. Not for them, but for herself. Not because they deserved it, but because she deserved peace. The thought made her heart feel lighter than it had in years. Days passed by in a blur, and slowly but surely, Tom's fever began to subside. The doctors assured her that he would recover completely, but the emotional toll of the experience weighed heavily on Lily. She was grateful for the support her parents had shown in the hospital, yet a part of her still struggled to understand why they had stayed away for so long. Sitting by Tom's bed that night, with the soft hum of the hospital machines around them, Lily let herself reflect on everything that had transpired. It was still hard to reconcile the anger, the bitterness, and the rejection with the sudden show of concern from her parents. Had they really changed, or were they just acting out of guilt for missing so much of Tom's life? A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see her mother, Helen, standing in the doorway, a hesitant expression on her face. "May I come in?" her mother asked quietly. Lily nodded, gesturing towards the chair beside Tom's bed. As Helen sat down, her eyes immediately moved to Tom, who was now sleeping peacefully. Lily could see the tears welling up in her mother's eyes, though she quickly blinked them away. "I'm so sorry," Helen began, her voice trembling. "I know I can't undo the past, but I wish I could have been there for you. For both of you. I should have been there. I should have stood by you." Lily felt her chest tighten at the words. This was the apology she had longed for, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure what to do with it. Her heart, though softened, still carried the weight of years of hurt. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Lily said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Helen nodded, her face a mixture of regret and understanding. I understand, she said. I don't expect you to, but I want you to know that I am here now. I want to be a part of Tom's life. I want to be a part of yours. I know I can't make up for the past, but I'm willing to try. Lily's eyes drifted to Tom again, watching him sleep so peacefully, unaware of the tension that had been weighing on his mother. For a brief moment she considered her mother's words. Maybe, just maybe, she could allow her parents back into her life. Not for her, but for Tom. He deserved to know his grandparents. He deserved to have the chance to build a relationship with them, even if it meant opening up old wounds for herself. I'll think about it, Lily said, her voice steadier now. But I can't promise anything. I'm still processing everything. Helen reached out, placing her hand gently on Lily's. That's all I ask. I'll be patient. I just want a chance to prove that I can be the mother you need now. Lily looked at her mother, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel the anger rising up in her. And there was still pain. Yes, but there was something else too. Something fragile and hesitant, yet full of hope. Maybe it wasn't too late for forgiveness. Maybe it wasn't too late for healing. As the days passed, Lily allowed her parents to visit more frequently. They brought gifts for Tom, shared stories, and spent time together as a family. The process was slow and painful, but Lily found herself softening in ways she hadn't expected. She was still afraid of being hurt again, but a part of her couldn't ignore the possibility of rebuilding something with her parents. One evening, after another quiet dinner, Lily sat down with Jack Thompson in her living room, the weight of the day settling around them. Jack had been a steady presence throughout this entire ordeal, offering her the support and encouragement she so desperately needed. He had never pushed her to forgive her parents or to make any decisions she wasn't ready for. He simply stood by her, allowing her the space to process. They seem sincere, Jack said softly, his voice full of understanding as he looked at Lily. I can see that it's not easy for you, but I also see how much you've changed. You've come so far, Lily. Lily sighed, rubbing her temples as the weight of the decision seemed to press down on her. I don't know what to do, Jack. I don't know if I can trust them again. They've hurt me so much, and yet, I can't deny that part of me still wants them in my life. I don't want to keep living in the past, but at the same time, I don't want to be hurt again. Jack reached out, gently pulling her into a comforting embrace. It's okay to take your time. You don't have to decide everything right now. Just keep doing what feels right for you and Tom. And I'll be here every step of the way. Lily nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude for the man who had been so unwavering in his support. He had never asked her to forgive her parents or to forget the past. He had simply been there for her when she needed him the most. The next few days were a whirlwind of hospital visits, family gatherings, and emotional conversations. Tom was finally well enough to go home, and with that, the tension between Lily and her parents seemed to ease, if only a little. They still had a long way to go, but Lily could feel the weight of her resentment starting to lift. And then, one evening, as the sun began to set and the cool evening breeze stirred the curtains in the living room, Lily sat down at the kitchen table with her parents. This time, they were not strangers. This time, they were not the people who had abandoned her. This time, they were simply a mother and father, sitting across from their daughter, hoping for a chance to make amends. Lily, I don't expect you to forgive us overnight, her father, John, said quietly, his voice filled with sincerity. But I want to make it right. I've had 20 years to think about my mistakes, and I've come to realize that it's not about fixing the past, it's about being there for you now. And Lily looked at her father, her heart aching at the sight of the man who had once been so rigid and unforgiving. But there was something different about him now, something vulnerable and genuine. I don't know what the future holds, Lily said slowly, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. But I'm willing to try. For Tom, for us. I'm willing to give this a chance. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of relief, not regret. Thank you, Lily, she whispered. Thank you for giving us another chance. Lily smiled faintly, her heart still raw but healing. She had made a decision. It wasn't easy, but it was the right one for her and for Tom. She was ready to move forward, to let go of the past, and to build a future that was no longer defined by hurt and rejection. As she looked at her parents, sitting in her home, their faces soft with hope and remorse, Lily realized that forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning to live with it, accepting the pain, and choosing to move forward anyway. And in that moment, surrounded by the people she had once lost and the man who had helped her find her strength. Lily knew that she was finally ready to heal. Healing and forgiveness. Lily had always believed that forgiveness was an abstract concept, something that was talked about in self-help books or preached during difficult times, but something she had never quite understood or practiced. For years, she had held onto the pain of being cast aside by the very people who were supposed to love and protect her. Yet, as the days went by, Lily found herself beginning to slowly dismantle the walls she had so carefully built to keep her family out. It wasn't easy. Her heart still bore the scars of those years spent alone, carrying the burden of her choices without the support she had once imagined from her parents. But with every visit, every small act of kindness from her parents, she could feel the tension in her chest loosening. It wasn't just their words. It was the actions that spoke louder than anything else. Her father, John, had changed. The rigid man who had once rejected her without hesitation now sat with Tom on the porch, playing catch and talking about everything and nothing. Helen, her mother, had taken small steps toward redemption as well. She helped Lily with Tom, showing up unannounced with bags of groceries, ready to take over for a few hours so Lily could get some much-needed rest. The road to healing wasn't a straight line. There were days when the anger would surface unexpectedly. Also, when Tom came home from school, talking about his classmates' relationships with their grandparents, Lily would feel a sharp pang in her chest. The ache of knowing that Tom didn't have the luxury of knowing his grandparents the way other children did, it still hurt. She wanted him to have the love and support she hadn't received, the kind that was freely given to other families. Yet she couldn't ignore the quiet satisfaction that came from seeing her parents step up in their own way. And then there was Jack. He had been a constant source of support and patience. His belief in her, even when she didn't believe in her herself, had been a steady light through the darkness. Lily could feel herself slowly opening up to him, sharing pieces of her heart that she had kept hidden for so long. There were moments of laughter, shared comfort, and silence, where no words were needed. Jack was there, always present, offering her the space to grow without judgment. "Lily, I know it's been hard," Jack said one evening as they sat on the back porch, watching Tom run around the yard with the dog. "But what I see when I look at you is strength. You've built something from nothing, and the way you're letting your parents back into your life, that's not weakness, it's courage. You're showing them and yourself that you can heal." Lily leaned back in her chair, the cool evening breeze brushing her hair away from her face. It was true. She had been strong for so long, but strength alone hadn't been enough to carry her through the years. What she needed was the strength to forgive, to heal, and to open her heart to the possibility of love again. Love from her parents, love from Jack, and most importantly, love for herself. "It's still hard, Jack. I won't lie about that. I still have days when I want to yell, to make them feel the pain I've carried for so long. But I'm tired, you know? Tired of holding on to the past. Tired of being angry. I don't want to teach Tom that bitterness is the way to handle things." Jack smiled, his eyes warm. "You're not perfect, Lily. No one is, but you're doing your best, and that's enough." Lily's gaze turned to Tom, who was now sitting on the grass, holding a rock up to the sky, pretending it was a telescope. Her heart swelled with affection for him. Everything she had done, everything she was still doing, it was for him. He was the light that had kept her moving forward when the world seemed dark. He had saved her in ways she didn't even realize. But there was still one piece missing, the final piece to her healing, the one thing she wasn't sure she could give: forgiveness. Could she really forgive her parents for everything they had put her through? For casting her out when she had needed them the most? For the years of silence, the unspoken rejection? Lily wasn't sure, but she was willing to try. She had to try. Her phone buzzed on the table, breaking her from her thoughts. It was a message from her mother, Helen. "Helen, I was thinking, would you like to join us for dinner on Sunday? It's been so long and I'd love to make things right. Just the three of us. I miss you, Lily. Please think about it." Lily's fingers hovered over the screen. This was it. The moment she had been dreading for years. Her mother was offering an olive branch, but could she accept it? Could she face the woman who had once turned her away? "Are you going to go?" Jack's voice pulled her back to reality. He had been watching her as she read the message, a knowing look on his face. Lily sighed deeply. "I don't know, Jack. I'm not sure if I'm ready for that. Part of me wants to say no, to keep them at arm's length. But I also know that if I don't try, if I don't make an effort, I'll always wonder what could have been." Jack nodded, giving her a reassuring smile. "You don't have to make any decisions right now. Take your time. You'll know when you're ready." The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. Lily found herself replaying the past over and over, wondering if she could forgive, if she could trust again, if she could welcome her parents back into her life after all these years of pain. She felt torn, her heart at war with itself. But as the weekend drew closer, she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't avoid this moment forever. It was time. The dinner invitation weighed heavily on her heart, but in the end, Lily knew what she had to do. She had to face her past, for herself, for Tom, and for the possibility of a future with her family. She sent a simple response to her mother's message, "I'll be there." A step toward healing. Lily stood in front of the mirror, her fingers nervously smoothing down the fabric of her dress. It was a simple, understated outfit, nothing too fancy, nothing that screamed for attention, but it felt like the most important thing she had ever worn. She had promised herself she wouldn't wear her heart on her sleeve today. She wouldn't allow herself to feel vulnerable. But that was easier said than done. Sunday afternoon had come faster than she anticipated. The invitation to dinner with her parents had hung over her like a cloud all week. She had spent the days leading up to this moment in a fog, working harder than usual, trying to distract herself from the anxiety gnawing at her insides. Tom had been excited about the prospect of seeing his grandparents again. He didn't quite understand the weight of the past, but he knew they were family, and that was all that mattered to him. His enthusiasm was almost infectious, and it made Lily question herself even more. Could she really put aside the years of hurt and rejection for him? Could she let go of the bitterness long enough to allow her parents back into her life? She had thought about all the reasons she should say no, how her father had called her a disgrace, how her mother had turned her back on her when she needed them most. But at the same time, Lily knew she had changed. She had worked hard to rebuild her life. She had learned the importance of forgiveness, not just for others, but for herself as well. She couldn't carry the weight of the past forever, and if she didn't try, she would always wonder. Her phone buzzed again, and Lily's heart skipped a beat. It was a message from Jack. "Jack, I know it's tough, but you're not doing this alone. Remember that. Whatever happens tonight, you've already come so far. I'm proud of you." Lily smiled softly, her fingers tracing the words as if to absorb their meaning. Jack had been her rock through all of this. His unwavering support had helped her more than he would ever know. He didn't just believe in her, he believed in the possibility of healing, in the idea that love could conquer the past. For that, she was forever grateful. She took a deep breath and walked downstairs, where Tom was already waiting by the door, his little face lighting up at the sight of her. "Are you ready, Mom?" Tom asked, his voice full of excitement. Lily nodded, trying to hide the nervousness that gripped her. "I'm ready, sweetheart. Let's go." As they pulled into her parents' driveway, Lily felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. The house was the same, small, familiar, and yet so different. Her childhood home now seemed like a distant memory, a place filled with ghosts of the past. It felt surreal, stepping up to the front door after all these years. Her hand hovered over the doorknob for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. Tom stood beside her, unaware of the storm brewing inside her. She could hear her parents' voices from the other side, muffled but unmistakable. With a final deep breath, she turned the handle and stepped inside. The moment they walked in, the tension in the room was palpable. Her mother, Helen, was standing in the kitchen, her back slightly hunched, her expression unreadable. Her father, John, sat in his usual chair by the fireplace, his face a mask of uncertainty. "Lily," Helen said quietly, her voice tinged with emotion. "You came." Lily nodded, her throat tight. She could feel her mother's gaze on her, searching for something, an apology, a sign of forgiveness, something to bridge the gap that had grown between them. But Lily had learned not to expect things from people who hadn't earned them, and she wasn't sure if her parents had earned forgiveness yet. "Mom," Lily said softly, her voice steady despite the waves of emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "This is Tom. You remember him?" Tom, ever the social butterfly, stepped forward and offered his hand. "Hi, Grandma. Hi, Grandpa." Helen's eyes softened, and she looked down at Tom as if seeing him for the first time. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips, but Lily noticed the hesitation in her mother's movements. John, too, remained quiet, his gaze fixed on the floor as if avoiding the weight of the moment. "Tom," John finally said, his voice gruff. "You've grown. I can't believe how big you are now." Then, there it was, the acknowledgement. It was small, but it was something. Lily could feel a shift in the air, a change in the way her parents were looking at her and at Tom. They were no longer the parents who had turned their backs on her all those years ago, but could that mean everything was truly forgiven? Was the past really behind them? They all sat down at the dinner table and the conversation started in an awkward, strained way, but gradually it grew more comfortable. They asked Tom about school, about his favorite games and hobbies. Tom chattered away, oblivious to the tension in the room, and for a brief moment it felt like a normal family dinner. But Lily couldn't ignore the underlying tension. The silence between her and her parents spoke volumes. They had apologized in their own way, but it wasn't enough to erase the pain. The hurt wasn't just about the years of rejection, it was about the broken trust, the shattered bond that could never be fully repaired overnight. After dinner, they sat in the living room, sipping tea in silence. Lily could hear the weight of her own thoughts in the quiet. She didn't know what to say. Her parents had tried, but could they really change? Could she let go of the past and build something new with them? It was then that her father, John, stood up. He walked over to where Lily was sitting, his face softening. "I'm sorry, Lily," he said, his voice low and sincere. "I was wrong. I should have supported you. I failed you as a father." Lily looked up at him, her heart thudding in her chest. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment she thought she might never hear. "I've made a lot of mistakes," he continued, his voice faltering. "But I want to make things right. If you'll let me, I want to be part of your life again. And Tom's too." Lily didn't know what to say at first. The words felt heavy, and for a moment she couldn't speak. The hurt, the anger, the disappointment, it all rushed back. But instead of pushing it all away, she chose to sit with it. She allowed herself to feel everything that had been buried for so long. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Dad, but I'm willing to try. For Tom, and for me." A long pause stretched between them. But then, John nodded, a small, hopeful smile crossing his face. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll take whatever you can give." Lily looked over at her mother, who was watching them closely. She saw the tears in her mother's eyes, the regret, the hope. "I don't know if we'll ever be the family we were before," Lily said, her voice shaking. "But I want to try. I don't want to carry this pain anymore." And just like that, something shifted. It wasn't magic, it wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was a step, a fragile, tentative step toward healing. As they sat together, the silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was filled with the possibility of something new, something that could grow over time. It would take work, it would take trust, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in a long while, Lily believed that maybe, just maybe, her heart could heal. A journey of love and redemption. The days after the dinner with her parents were a whirlwind of emotions. Lily found herself grappling with a strange blend of relief and uncertainty. While part of her felt lighter, like a heavy weight had been lifted off her chest, another part of her was hesitant. It was easy to forgive in words, but forgiveness in action, true reconciliation, was something entirely different. Lily wasn't sure if she was ready for it, but she also wasn't willing to carry the burden of resentment any longer. The following week, Jack's words kept echoing in her mind. "You don't have to have it all figured out today. It's a process, and you don't have to do it alone." The truth of those words slowly began to sink in. She didn't need to fix everything in one go. Healing took time, and she had already come so far. Now, she had to trust that the same love and patience she had shown herself through the years could be extended to her family, and to herself. Lily stood by the kitchen window on a crisp Saturday morning, watching Tom as he played in the yard. He had been thriving lately. His joy was infectious. His laughter filled the house, making it feel like a home again. For the first time in years, Lily found herself imagining a future full of possibilities. A future where pain wasn't the center of her life, where forgiveness and love shaped the way she lived and moved through the world. Tom came rushing into the kitchen, his face flushed with excitement. "Mom, Grandma says we can go apple picking today," he exclaimed, jumping up and down. Lily couldn't help but laugh at his energy. Grandma Rose had always made life feel special, even in its hardest moments. Though Rose was no longer physically present, her spirit continued to guide Lily, teaching her how to love without hesitation and to find strength in vulnerability. "That sounds wonderful," Lily said, bending down to Tom's level and smiling. "But first, how about we have some breakfast? After all, you need your energy for all that apple picking." Tom nodded eagerly, and as she set about preparing their breakfast, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Jack. "Jack, I'll be over later to help with the garden. Just wanted to remind you, what you're doing with your family is huge. You're doing the right thing, Lily." The words filled her with warmth. Jack had stood by her every step of the way. They hadn't rushed anything between them. But Lily couldn't ignore the way his presence made her feel. Whole, supported, loved. For so long she had tried to navigate life on her own, thinking she had to do it all alone. But now, with Jack, she was beginning to understand that love didn't mean perfection. It meant showing up, being there for each other, even when things were messy. By midday, after a morning full of laughter, errands, and planning, Lily found herself on the porch with her parents. They had been talking for a while, but the conversation had finally turned towards something she had been avoiding: the past. Her father was sitting next to her, looking older, frailer than she remembered, but there was a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Helen, her mother, sat on the other side of the porch swing, holding a cup of tea, her fingers gripping the rim as if it might anchor her to the ground. "I've thought about what you said," Lily began, her voice a little hesitant. "About us starting over. I want to believe it's possible. I want to believe that we can be a family again. But I can't ignore the years we've lost." Her father looked at her with regret, his eyes moist. "I know, sweetheart. I know we can't get those years back. And I don't expect you to forget everything we did. But I want you to know this. I've spent so many years regretting my decisions, regretting the way I treated you. I don't want to waste any more time. If you'll allow me, I want to be part of your life. I want to be a grandfather to Tom, if he'll have me." Lily swallowed the lump in her throat. It was as if the years of pain, the years of silence, were beginning to melt away in this one conversation. Her mother, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up, her voice trembling. "I've always wanted to be there for you, Lily," Helen said, her words coming out slowly, as though she were testing them. "But I didn't know how to be. I was scared. I made mistakes and I wish I could take them back. But I want to be a part of your life again. I want to be your mother. And I want to be Tom's grandmother." Lily closed her eyes for a moment, taking in their words. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was enough. Enough to start something new. Enough to begin to heal the wounds that had festered for so long. And as she looked over at her parents, older, more vulnerable than before, Lily realized that she had carried the weight of their mistakes for far too long. It was time to let go. "Maybe we don't have to go back to how things were," Lily said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Maybe we just need to move forward. Together, in our own way." Her mother nodded, and for the first time in years, Lily saw the warmth in her eyes, a glimpse of the love that had always been there, buried beneath years of pride and fear. "Together," Helen echoed, her voice breaking. "We'll do this together." Later that day, Jack arrived to help in the garden, as promised. Tom was already outside, his excitement over their planned trip to the orchard palpable. As Lily walked outside to join them, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. She had no idea where this journey would take her, but she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer alone. With Jack by her side, and her family beginning to find their way back into her life, Lily felt a quiet sense of hope building inside her. She had survived the worst of the storm. Now it was time to embrace the calm. As she looked out over the garden, watching Tom chase butterflies and Jack prune the roses, Lily realized that redemption wasn't a destination, it was a journey. And this journey, for the first time in a long time, felt like it was hers to shape.